The smell hit me before the sound. Acrid. Melting plastic coating my throat. It was 3 in the morning when the pounding started. I scrambled down the stairwell barefoot, gasping in a tunnel of black smoke, but standing on the pavement, watching my life in Ashford Heights turn to ash, wasn't the moment that finally broke me. That came hours later, when I called home for help, and my father simply said, "Not our problem." The smell hit me before the sound did. It was not the campfire scent of burning wood, comforting and nostalgic. It was acrid, chemical, the taste of melting plastic and singed hair coating the back of my throat. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and stared into the dark. Then came the pounding. It was a fist against a door, heavy and desperate, reverberating through the thin drywall of my apartment in Ashford Heights. "Fire! Get out!" The voice was a raw scream, distorted by panic. I did not think. I did not ponder. My body moved with a reptilian efficiency that bypassed my conscious mind. I rolled out of bed, my feet hitting the cold laminate floor. My go-bag was in the closet, a habit from a time when I read too many articles about earthquake preparedness. I grabbed the strap. My laptop sat on the desk. The lid closed, holding every draft, every tax return, every photograph I had not backed up in 6 months. I swept it into the bag. I turned to the nightstand for my phone, but the room was already changing. The air had thickened, turning gray and opaque. A heavy warmth pressed against the bedroom door. I ran. I reached the front door and unlocked it, but when I pulled it open, the hallway was gone. In its place was a choking tunnel of black smoke. Rolling like a physical wave, the ceiling lights were obscured, glowing like dim, dying stars in a nebula. Heat punched me in the face. Dry and suffocating, I coughed, the sound scraping my throat, and ducked low. A figure stumbled past me in the haze, a neighbor whose name I had never learned, clutching a terrified terrier to his chest. The stairs. He choked out, "Go to the stairs." I followed him. The carpet in the hallway felt hot under my bare feet. I had no shoes. I had no coat. I was wearing a thin cotton t-shirt and pajama shorts, and I was running for my life. We hit the stairwell door, and the air cleared slightly. Though the noise was deafening now, the fire alarm was not ringing, but the building itself was groaning. A deep structural moan that vibrated through the concrete steps. People were moving in a chaotic stream. A woman in a silk robe held the railing with a white-knuckled grip, sobbing quietly. A man behind me put a hand on my shoulder to steady himself or to push me faster. I could not tell. "Keep moving." Someone yelled from below. "Don't stop." We descended into the dark. My bare soles slapped against the gritty concrete. I stepped on something sharp, a dropped key, a piece of gravel, and felt a pinch of pain. But I ignored it. We were a single organism, a tangle of limbs and fear, flowing downward until the heavy steel door at the bottom burst open and the night air rushed in to meet us. We spilled out onto the sidewalk, gasping, coughing, stumbling away from the heat radiating from the brick facade. I made it to the curb across the street and turned around. It was hideous. It was spectacular. Flames were punching through the upper windows of the 4th floor, ragged orange tongues licking the night sky. Glass shattered with a sound like gunshot, raining down onto the parked cars below. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. I watched as the window I had looked out of just hours ago. Watching the streetlights flicker, went dark with soot, then bright with fire. I stood there, shivering in the cool night air, my chest heaving. I clutched my bag to my stomach. I patted my pockets, empty. My purse was on the kitchen counter. My medication, the anxiety prescription that kept the edges of the world from getting too sharp, was in the bathroom cabinet. My phone was on the nightstand, gone. The realization did not hit all at once. It landed in slow, nauseating waves. First came numbness, a gray static that filled my head and made the screaming sirens sound miles away. Then came a trembling anger, a fury so intense my hands shook violently. Why me? Why now? I had just paid off the credit card. I had just started to feel like the ground was solid. Then came the grief. It was sharp and sudden, ripping a sob from my throat that sounded wet and ugly. I clapped a hand over my mouth. Around me, strangers were hugging, crying, filming the destruction with their phones. I felt exposed. I felt reduced to a spectacle. It was embarrassing. This naked display of loss in front of a gathering crowd of onlookers who were safe in their pajamas, watching my life burn as if it were late-night entertainment. The Ashford Heights Community Aid Center was a gymnasium that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. They had set up folding tables and cots in rows. A depressing geometry of disaster relief. I sat on a metal chair, wrapped in a scratchy gray wool blanket someone had draped over my shoulders. My feet were dirty, the soles blackened with soot and street grime. I tried to tuck them under the chair. A volunteer with a clipboard approached me. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, her eyes scanning me not as a person, but as a logistical problem to be solved. "Name?" she asked. Pen hovering. "Sarah Butler," I said. My voice sounded rusty. "Unit number?" 304? She made a mark on her paper. "Okay. Sarah, we have some toiletries over there. There is coffee and water. The Red Cross is bringing vouchers for clothing in the morning." I nodded, clutching the blanket tighter. "Do you have anyone to call?" she asked. "A friend? Family? Somewhere you can stay tonight?" The question cracked the porcelain shell I had been holding together. I stared at her. The noise of the gymnasium, the crying children, the murmur of hushed conversations, the squeak of sneakers, faded. "I need a phone," I whispered. "My phone is inside." She pointed to a desk near the entrance. "There is a landline there. Keep it brief. There is a line." I walked to the desk. My hands were trembling so badly it took me 2 tries to dial the number. I knew it by heart. It was the number of the house in the suburbs where I had grown up. The house with the manicured lawn and the white carpets that were never to be walked on with shoes. The phone rang 3 times. "Hello?" It was my mother. "Denise." Her voice was groggy, laced with the irritation of being woken at 4 in the morning. "Mom," I said. "It is Sarah." "Sarah?" she asked. "Do you know what time it is?" "There was a fire," I said. The words tumbled out, fast and brittle. "My apartment building. It is gone. Mom, everything is gone. I am at a shelter. I don't have shoes." There was a pause. I could hear the rustle of sheets, the muffled sound of her waking my father. "A fire?" she repeated. "Are you hurt?" "No," I said. I inhaled some smoke. "My feet are cut up, but I am okay. I don't have anywhere to go." Another pause. Longer this time. I heard my father, Mark, murmuring in the background. His voice was a low rumble, unintelligible, but distinct in its tone. It was the tone of a man assessing a liability. "Sarah," Denise said, her voice flattening. It lost the grogginess and took on that distinct, polished edge she used when she was explaining why I could not have a second scoop of ice cream because it was glutinous. "We can't take on chaos right now. You know your father's blood pressure has been up." I gripped the phone receiver so hard, my knuckles turned white. "Chaos? I am not bringing chaos. I am bringing me. I just need a place to sleep for a couple of days until I figure out the insurance." I heard Mark's voice clearly then. He must have taken the phone or leaned close to it. "Sarah," he said. "Dad," I said, a desperate hope flaring in my chest. "This is a terrible situation," he said. "Truly unfortunate. But you are 32 years old. These are adult consequences. You chose to live in that city, in that building. We warned you about the risks of renting in older developments." I felt the air leave my lungs. Adult consequences? I barely escaped with my life. I said, my voice rising, "This isn't a parking ticket. My home burned down." "Lower your voice," he said. "You are hysterical. We cannot have you coming here and disrupting our peace with this drama. You need to handle this. That is what adults do." "Mom?" I asked, the words sounding small, pathetic. "Listen to your father," Denise said. She sounded distant, as if she were already drifting back to sleep. "We hope you figure it out." "Not our problem," Mark said. The line went dead. I stood there, pressing the plastic receiver against my ear, listening to the dial tone drone on and on. It was a flat, singular note that sounded exactly like the end of the world. I placed the phone back in the cradle. The volunteer at the desk looked up at me, offering a sympathetic, wincing smile. "No luck?" she asked. I looked at my hands. They were covered in soot, dark smudges that made my skin look diseased. "No," I said, "no luck." I spent the first night in a roadside motel called the Blue Heron, located 3 miles from the shelter. I paid for it with a credit card that I knew was hovering dangerously close to its limit, $109 a night plus tax. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. The carpet was sticky. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. I went into the bathroom and turned on the shower. The water was lukewarm, but I stood under it for 20 minutes, scrubbing at my skin with the small bar of motel soap. The water swirling down the drain was gray. I scrubbed until my skin was raw and red, but I couldn't feel clean. The soot felt like it had seeped into my pores, into my bloodstream. I stepped out and dried myself with a towel that was too small and too rough. I wiped the steam from the mirror and looked at myself. My eyes were rimmed with red. My hair was a tangled mess. I looked like a refugee. I walked back into the bedroom and sat on the bed. I had my laptop. I had my go bag with a change of underwear and a granola bar. That was it. I had been living as if stability was guaranteed. I had my routine. I had my coffee shop. I had my Sunday phone calls where I pretended everything was fine to parents who didn't care. I had built a life on a foundation of sand, and now the tide had come in. I lay down on top of the covers, shivering despite the heat of the room. I closed my eyes, but every time I drifted off, I smelled smoke. I heard the pounding. I saw the fire punching through the glass. Not our problem. The words echoed in the dark room, louder than the traffic on the highway outside. The next morning, the sky was a brilliant, insulting blue. I took a cab back to the vicinity of the building. The police had cordoned off the block with yellow tape. The structure itself was a skeletal ruin, wet and black, smelling of char and ruin. A group of residents had gathered near the police line. Standing in front of them was Owen Kettler, the building manager. Owen was a man who always looked like he was selling you a used car. He knew had a transmission leak. He wore a suit that fit poorly, shiny at the elbows. He was holding a stack of papers. I joined the group. I saw the man with the terrier. I saw the woman in the silk robe, now wearing sweatpants and a borrowed jacket. "Everyone, please, listen up," Owen said, raising his hands. "This is a tragic event, a truly unfortunate event, but we are here to help." He started handing out the papers. I took one. It was a single sheet, printed on high-quality stock. It did not look like something typed up in a panic at 4 a.m. It looked designed. Tenant instruction sheet. It listed contact numbers for the Red Cross and the city shelter, and then, in bold at the bottom, approved relocation partners. There was a list of 3 apartment complexes, all owned by companies I had never heard of. "Please contact these partners immediately," Owen said, reciting the speech as if he had rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "They have been notified of the situation and are ready to expedite your applications. We want to get you housed as quickly as possible." "Owen," I said, stepping forward. My voice was steady, surprising me. "What about our deposits? What about our prorated rent for the month?" Owen looked at me, his eyes sliding away to a point over my shoulder. "Sarah, right? Look, everything is in the packet. We have to follow protocol. The insurance adjusters have to do their assessments. Reimbursements will take time. This sheet looks prepared." Someone else said, "Standard emergency protocol." Owen said quickly, "We prioritize tenant safety and transition." He checked his watch. "I have to meet the fire marshal. Please, use the resources on the sheet." He turned and walked away, walking fast, like a man afraid of being followed. I looked at the paper again. approved relocation partners. It felt cold. It felt corporate. It felt like we were cattle being herded from one pen to another. I sat on the curb outside a coffee shop a block away and opened my laptop. I used their public Wi-Fi to find the number for Hallowbrook Mutual. I dialed using an app on my laptop, wearing a headset I found in the bottom of my bag. "Welcome to Hallowbrook Mutual. Your call is important to us." I waited on hold for 45 minutes. The music was a looping piano track that sounded like despair set to a melody. Finally, a human voice. "Claims. This is Jason." "Jason," I said. "My name is Sarah Butler. My apartment building burned down last night. I need to file a claim." "Policy number?" I gave it to him. I had it saved in a password manager. One moment. Sarah, typing. Silence. More typing. "Okay. I see the policy here. Renter's insurance, coverage for personal property and loss of use." "Yes," I said. "I need the loss of use funds immediately. I am in a motel. I have nothing." "Right," Jason said. His voice was not unkind, but it was detached. "Here's the thing, Sarah. Because this is a major structural fire involving the entire building, the cause of loss is currently listed as undetermined." "So?" I asked. "The building is gone. My stuff is ash. What does the cause matter?" "Well, if the cause is determined to be tenant negligence, not saying it was you, just generally, or if it falls under certain exclusions. We have to wait for the official fire report before we can release the full funds." "Wait?" I asked. "Wait how long?" "Could be a few days. Could be a few weeks. It depends on the investigation. I can't wait weeks." "Jason, I have $100 to my name. I can open the claim." Jason said, "I can give you a claim number, but until the liability is cleared, my hands are tied on the payout." Tragedy had become bureaucracy in the span of a 10-minute phone call. "Fine," I said. "Give me the number." I went back to the motel that afternoon. I felt heavy, gravity pulling at my bones. I was sitting in the small lobby, drinking the complimentary coffee that tasted like brown water, when a woman walked in. She was different. She was not wearing a uniform. She wore dark work pants, sturdy boots, and a gray windbreaker. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She carried herself with a calm authority that made the room seem quieter. She scanned the lobby, her eyes landing on me. "Sarah Butler?" she asked. I stood up. "Yes, I'm Lena Crowell," she said, "fire investigator for the city. Do you have a moment?" We sat in a quiet corner of the lobby, away from the front desk clerk who was watching a game show on a small TV. "I just need to take a statement," Lena said. She opened a notebook. She did not use a tablet or a phone. She used a pen. I told her everything. The smell, the pounding, the lack of an alarm, the smoke in the hallway. She listened intently, writing in shorthand. She did not interrupt. She did not offer platitudes. "You were in Unit 304? She asked. "Yes, that is the north side. 3rd floor. Near the stairwell." "Yes." Lena stopped writing. She looked at me. Her eyes were gray, intelligent, and searching. "Sarah, let me ask you a small question. It might seem odd. Okay, in the last few weeks, did you ever hear your smoke detector chirp? You know the sound, the low battery signal." I frowned, thinking back. The days blurred together. But I remembered the annoyance. "Yes," I said, "about 3 weeks ago. It was driving me crazy. It would chirp every minute or so." "And then?" Lena asked. "Did you change the battery?" "No," I said. "I couldn't reach it. The ceilings are high. I put in a maintenance request. And? They came and fixed it." I said, well, the chirping stopped. "I assumed they fixed it." Lena's eyes flickered. It was subtle, a tiny contraction of the pupils, but it was unmistakable. She looked down at her notebook. The chirping stopped. She repeated, "Did you see them fix it?" "No," I said. "I was at work. I came home and it was silent. That is helpful," Lena said. Her voice was neutral, but the energy coming off her had changed. It was sharper now. "Do you know the name of the maintenance company?" she asked. Was it the building super? No. I said, it was a vendor. I remember seeing a van in the lot a few times. Bright. Something. Bright Hearth. I think. Bright Hearth. Lena wrote the name down. She underlined it twice. Thank you. Sarah. She said. She closed the notebook. Is that important? I asked. The detector? Everything is important right now, she said. She stood up. You should get some rest. She walked out, and for the first time since the fire, I felt like someone had actually seen me, but I also felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Why did her eyes flicker when I said the chirping stopped? That night, the motel room felt smaller. The walls seemed to press in. I sat on the bed with my laptop. The screen was the only light in the room. I connected to the motel Wi-Fi, which was slow and spotty. I opened my email. I had thousands of messages, receipts, newsletters, work updates. I searched for maintenance. I scrolled past the confirmation of my request 3 weeks ago. Ticket 4092. Smoke detector. Beeping. Resolved. Resolved. I searched for building notice. There were the usual emails from Owen about trash pickup and parking. But then I found one from 2 months ago. It was in my promotions tab, probably because it came from a mass mailing service. Subject: important safety upgrades. Schedule notice. I opened it. Dear resident, please be advised that authorized contractors will be accessing all units over the next week to perform mandatory safety upgrades to life safety systems. This includes updates to sensors and wiring. No action is required on your part. Access will be via master key. Thank you for your cooperation. I stared at the sender address. Admin Ashford-safety-updates. It wasn't from the rental office. It wasn't from Owen's usual email address. I looked at the phrasing again. Authorized contractors. Life safety systems. It sounded legitimate. It used the right buzzwords, but it felt off. It was too sterile, too vague. And why did it come from a domain name that looked like it was bought for $5 just to send this one email? Someone imitating professionalism. I remembered the smoke detector. It had chirped. Then the contractors came. Then it stopped. And last night, when the smoke turned my hallway into a killing jar, it hadn't made a sound. I sat in the dark, the laptop screen glowing against my face. The smell of smoke was still in my hair, in my clothes. I thought about my parents, not our problem. I thought about Owen Kettler and his prepared packet. I thought about Lena Crowell underlining Bright Hearth twice. I was alone. I was broke. I was homeless. But as I stared at that generic email address, a new feeling began to rise up through the layers of grief and shock. It wasn't hope. It wasn't relief. It was suspicion. And for the first time in 24 hours, my hands stopped shaking. The return to the building was not a homecoming. It was an autopsy. 2 days after the fire, the city deemed the stairwell stable enough for escorted retrieval. We were grouped by floor, gathered on the sidewalk like tourists waiting for a grotesque attraction. I stood with 3 others from the 3rd floor, wearing borrowed sneakers that pinched my toes and a windbreaker that smelled of someone else's laundry detergent, a firefighter in full turnout gear, minus the helmet. Let us in. Watch your step, he said. His voice was muffled by the mask hanging around his neck. Stay in the center of the hallway. Do not touch the walls. Do not try to open any doors that are stuck. If I say leave, we leave immediately. We walked into the mouth of the beast. The lobby was a swamp. The water used to extinguish the flames had pooled and stagnated, mixing with soot and drywall paste to create a gray slurry that coated the floor. The air was cold and damp, holding the sour, stinging scent of wet charcoal. It was silent, a dead silence that felt heavy on my eardrums. We climbed the stairs. My legs felt leaden. With every step, the destruction grew more articulate. On the 2nd floor, the walls were stained with smoke patterns that looked like phantom hands reaching upward. On the 3rd floor, the world had ended. We moved single file down the corridor. The carpet was sodden squish beneath my feet. When we reached my unit, I stopped. The door was not just burned. It was warped, twisted in its frame like a piece of melted taffy. The heat had been so intense here that the metal handle had fused into a shapeless lump. The firefighter used a crowbar to pry it open. The wood groaned, a sound like a breaking bone, and then swung inward. I stepped inside. My living room was a cavern of blackened ribs. The ceiling had collapsed in the center, bringing down the insulation and the plaster in a wet, chaotic heap on top of my sofa. The sofa itself was unrecognizable, just a charred skeleton of springs and wood. I stood there, blinking, trying to map my memories onto this devastation. That corner was where I read books. That pile of ash was my desk. "Grab what you need," the firefighter said gently. 5 minutes. I stepped over a pile of debris. I reached my bedroom. The fire had been less hungry here, but the smoke had been thorough. My clothes in the closet were gray and stiff. My mattress was a sponge. I found my jewelry box on the dresser. It was stained but intact. I opened it. The silver was tarnished black, but my grandmother's ring was there. I shoved it into my pocket. I found my passport in the drawer. The edges curled and brown, but the photo page legible. I turned to leave, and that was when I saw it. In the hallway outside my neighbor's door, Unit 305, there was a plastic lump fused to the floor. It was blue, or it had been blue. It was a cat carrier. Mrs. Higgins lived in 305. She had a tabby named Buster. I stared at the melted plastic. The metal grate was twisted. The plastic had dripped and hardened like candle wax. It was a small, domestic object transformed into something horrific. It made the loss feel personal and obscene. This wasn't just property damage. This was violence. I looked away, bile rising in my throat. As I turned, my gaze caught something on the hallway wall, just above eye level. It was a smoke detector. It was hanging open like a cracked clamshell, the cover dangling by a thin plastic hinge. I paused, squinting in the dim light of the emergency floods the crew had set up. The wall around the detector was coated in thick, velvety soot. It was black as pitch. But the plastic casing of the detector itself, the inside of the backplate where the battery should sit, was white. Stark, impossible white. It was clean. If the detector had been on the wall during the fire, smoke should have seeped into every crevice. It should have stained the inside, but it looked like someone had wiped it, or like the cover had been popped open after the smoke had settled, but before the soot could cling to the interior. And the battery compartment was empty. "Let's go," the firefighter said. "Time is up." I stared at that circle of white plastic for 1 second longer, burning the image into my mind. Then I turned and walked back into the darkness. 2 hours later, I sat in the front seat of my rental car, a compact sedan paid for by the insurance company's emergency fund, and called Lena Crowell. I did not have her number saved, so I read it off the business card she had given me, typing it into the cheap prepaid phone I had bought at a drugstore. "Crowell," she answered on the first ring. "It is Sarah Butler." I said, "From the Ashford Heights fire." "Sarah," Lena said. Her voice shifted, becoming less clipped. "Are you all right?" "I just came from the building." I said, "They let us in to get things. I hope you found something worth saving." "Not much." I said, "But Lena, I saw something. In the hallway. Tell me." "The smoke detector outside Unit 305. It was hanging open. The battery was gone." "That is not uncommon," Lena said. "Heat can warp the casing, 'cause the battery's to pop out or fall." It was clean inside. I said, there was a silence on the other end of the line. A heavy, thoughtful silence. "Define clean," she said. "The wall was black." I said, "The outside of the detector was black, but the inside backplate? It was white, like new, like smoke never touched it." I waited. I could hear the scratch of a pen on paper. "Did you touch it?" she asked. "No." "Good. That is good." "Sarah, I also found the emails." I said, "The ones about the safety upgrades. I forwarded them to you about 10 minutes ago. I'm pulling them up now." Lena said. I could hear the click of a mouse. "Okay, I see them. Sent from admin Ashford, -safety-updates.com. It looks official." I said, "It is designed to look official." Lena said, "But look at the header information. I am running a quick domain registry check. She paused. I held the phone tight against my ear, watching rain start to drizzle against the windshield. Here it is, Lena said. This domain was registered 3 months ago. The registrant is listed as a private proxy service in Panama. Is that normal? For a landlord? No. Renhold Residential, your building owner, has their own corporate domain. They run everything through their internal servers, if they hired a contractor. The emails usually come from the contractor or the property manager directly. They do not set up a brand new, anonymous website just to schedule maintenance. So who sent it? I asked. That is the question, Lena said. Sarah, I need you to listen to me carefully. I am listening. This inconsistency with the smoke detector, combined with this email domain, it suggests coordination. It suggests that someone wanted access to those units without leaving a traceable digital footprint tied to the main company. What are you saying? I am saying you need to be careful. Do not confront Owen Kettler in person. Do not go back to the building alone. Even if the police tape is down, if you talk to anyone, document it. Lena, I said, was it arson? I cannot say that yet. She said, the word carries legal weight. I am not ready to support, but I will say this. Accidents are usually messy. This feels tidy. She hung up. I sat in the car, listening to the rain. Tidy. My apartment was a charred ruin. Mrs. Higgins' cat carrier was a melted lump of plastic. My life had been incinerated, and she called it tidy. I did not listen to Lena. I couldn't. The anger was a living thing in my chest, a hot coal that demanded oxygen. I dialed Owen Kettler. He answered on the 4th ring, sounding breathless, like he had been running. Ashford Heights Management. This is Owen. Owen, it is Sarah Butler, Unit 304. Sarah, he said, his voice pitching up an octave into forced cheerfulness. I am so glad you called. Did you get the relocation packet? We have some great units available at the Vistas. They are offering a month of free rent to our displaced residents. I don't want a new apartment. Owen, I said, I want to know who was in my apartment 3 weeks ago. There was a pause. The line crackled. I don't follow, Owen said. The safety upgrades? I said. The maintenance crew that came in to check the sensors. Who were they? Oh, that, Owen said. That was standard procedure. Just routine compliance. Who were they? I asked again. I want the name of the company. Sarah, look, I know you are upset. Trauma makes us fixate on details that don't matter. The important thing now is moving forward. Who were they? He sighed. It was a ragged, annoyed sound. Bright Hearth Facilities, he said. They are a vendor we use. Now, about the Vistas. Why did the email come from a Panama domain? I asked. What? The email notice. It didn't come from Renhold. It came from a shell domain. I don't know what you're talking about, Owen said. Fast and sharp. I didn't send those emails. Look, Sarah, I have another call coming in. Please check the relocation partners. It is your best option. He hung up. I stared at the phone. He was scared. Owen Kettler was a man who measured his life in lease renewals and noise complaints, and he was terrified. I met Mara Vance at a diner 3 blocks from the burnt-out shell of my building. She had reached out to me on social media after seeing a post I made about the fire in a neighborhood group. Mara was small, fierce, and vibrated with the energy of someone who drank too much espresso and fought too many losing battles. She wore a knitted beanie and a denim jacket covered in enamel pins with slogans like, "Housing is a human right," and "Eat the landlords." "You must be Sarah," she said, sliding into the booth opposite me without waiting for an invitation. She dumped a canvas messenger bag on the table. "I am," I said. "Thank you for meeting me." She waved a hand dismissively. "It is what I do. I am with the Tenant Justice Coalition. We see this all the time." "See what?" I asked. "Fires? Displacement disguised as disaster," she said. She ordered a black coffee from the waitress without looking at the menu. "Tell me what they have offered you," she said. I told her about the instruction sheet, the approved relocation partners, the waiver Owen had tried to get people to sign in the parking lot. claiming it was just an acknowledgement of receipt for emergency supplies. Classic, Mara said. She pulled a notepad out of her bag. They are trying to clear the board. Sarah, look at the neighborhood. Ashford Heights is gentrifying. Your building was one of the last rent-controlled holdouts, or at least one of the last with affordable market rates. Renhold Residential wants to flip it, but they can't kick everyone out without cause. So they burn it down? I asked. That seems extreme. Mara shook her head. They don't have to light the match themselves. They just create the conditions. Deferred maintenance, faulty wiring, cutting the budget for security so vagrants get in, or sometimes, they hire third-party management firms that specialize in distress. Have you heard of Grey Ridge Asset Solutions? I asked. The name had popped into my head. A memory from my research the night before. Mara stopped moving. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Where did you hear that name? I don't know. I lied. I think I saw it on a truck once. If Grey Ridge is involved, Mara said, her voice dropping to a whisper, you are in deeper than you think. They are not landlords. They are fixers. They come in when a company wants to liquefy an asset and doesn't care about the collateral damage. She leaned forward. Listen to me. They will stonewall you. Then they will blame you. They will say you had a candle burning, or a space heater. Then they will offer you a settlement, fast cash, just enough to cover your lost furniture and a deposit on a new place. If you take it, you sign away your right to sue, you sign an NDA, and you disappear. I am not disappearing. I said, good, Mara said, but you need to know who you are fighting. This isn't just about a bad landlord. It is about a math equation. To them, the building is worth more as a vacant lot than it is as your home. And the fire? That is just an accelerated eviction. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text message. From Mom. Hope you figure it out. That was it. 5 words. No. I love you. No. Are you safe? No. Do you need money for food? I stared at the screen until the backlight timed out and went black. The distance between us didn't just hurt. It stung. A sharp, physical pain in the center of my chest. It wasn't a new pain. It was an old injury. Aggravated. I closed my eyes and I was 7 years old again. I was standing in the living room, holding a report card with straight A's. My mother was arranging flowers in a crystal vase. She glanced at the paper, then back at the flowers. That is what is expected. Sarah. She had said, we don't celebrate you doing what you are supposed to do. I remembered the piano recital where I missed one note in the second movement of a Mozart sonata. The ride home had been silent, not angry, just silent. The silence that said, you failed to perform. You are not worth the effort of conversation. Affection was a transaction. Love was a wage paid for perfection. And now, in my moment of absolute imperfection, homeless, dirty, chaotic, I had defaulted on the contract. Hope you figure it out. I opened my banking app. I needed to check my balance. I had paid for the rental car and the motel extension, and I was terrified the card would be declined when I tried to buy dinner. I logged in. I blinked. The balance was higher than it should have been. $3,000 higher. I tapped on the transaction history. Pending deposit. Butler Family Trust. Reimbursement. The date on the transaction was yesterday, the morning after the fire. I stared at the numbers. $3,000. It was a significant amount of money for me. It would pay for the motel for a month. It would buy clothes. But it was a pittance to them. My parents lived in a house worth $2 million. They took vacations that cost 10 times this amount. But it wasn't the amount that made my stomach turn. It was the label. Reimbursement. Reimbursement for what? I hadn't asked them for money yet. I hadn't sent them receipts. And the timing. The transaction was dated 8 a.m. on the morning after the fire. The fire had been put out at 5 a.m. I had called them at 4:30 a.m., within 4 hours of my call, while I was still sitting in the shelter with soot on my face. Someone, my father, presumably, had logged into the family trust account and authorized a transfer. It felt efficient. It felt prepared. It didn't feel like a rescue. It felt like hush money. It felt like a line item in a ledger being balanced. Daughter in crisis, $3,000. Problem solved. It was just enough to keep me quiet. Just enough so they could tell themselves they had helped. Just enough to keep me from showing up on their doorstep. I felt a sudden, violent urge to transfer it back, to reject it, but I looked at the motel key on the table. I looked at Mara Vance, watching me with concern. I couldn't afford pride. Not yet. Lena Crowell came to the motel the next evening. She didn't come to the lobby this time. She knocked on my door. I let her in. The room was a mess of papers, insurance forms, printouts of emails, notes I had taken after talking to Mara. Lena stood in the center of the room, looking at the chaos. "You are digging," she said. "I have to." I said, "No one else is." "I am," she said quietly. She sat on the edge of the unmade bed. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes. "We got the preliminary lab results back on the debris samples," she said. "And?" "There were traces of an accelerant near the service closet on the 3rd floor." "Your floor? Gasoline?" I asked. "No. Something more sophisticated. An industrial solvent. High volatility. Burns hot. Evaporates quickly. It is not the kind of thing a tenant keeps under their sink for cleaning. It is the kind of thing used in commercial construction or demolition. The service closet." I said, "That is right next to the stairwell." "Exactly," Lena said. "If the fire started there..." I traced the layout in my mind. It would cut off the elevator. It would funnel smoke into the hallway. But it wouldn't necessarily burn the units immediately. It would create panic. It was placed to spread fast. Lena said, "But not to target a specific apartment. It was strategic." "Strategic," I repeated, "like a controlled burn. We are calling it incendiary," Lena said. "That is the official term." "But Sarah, listen to me. Proving it was incendiary is one thing. Proving who held the match is another. It was Brighthearth." I said, "It has to be." Lena held up a hand. "Speculation is not evidence. We need to connect the solvent to a purchaser. We need to place a person at the scene. I have a neighbor." I said, "Mr. Henderson in 302. He told me something this morning when we were at the site." "What did he tell you?" "He said the security cameras in the hallway were down." "Cameras go down all the time," Lena said. "He said they went down 2 nights before the fire, and he saw a tech working on them the morning after the fire." Lena went very still. "The morning after?" she asked. "Yes, before the fire marshal arrived, before you arrived. He saw a guy in a gray van, no logo, fiddling with the wiring panel in the lobby. Fixing the evidence," Lena whispered, "or removing it." She stood up, her energy renewed. "I need to find this Mr. Henderson. He is staying at the Red Cross shelter." I said. Lena nodded. She walked to the door, then stopped. She turned back to me. "Sarah," she said, "I am a fire investigator. My job is to find the origin and cause. Once I classify it as arson, it becomes a police matter. But the police, they are overworked. They look for the easiest answer. A disgruntled tenant, a domestic dispute. They will look at me?" I asked. "They will look at everyone." She said, "But if this is what I think it is, corporate, organized, professional, the police might not have the resources or the inclination to follow the money. So what do I do?" "Keep the records," she said. "Keep every email. Keep every voicemail." "And Sarah?" "Yes? Don't trust the bank deposit either." She slipped out the door before I could ask her how she knew about the money. The voicemail came at 11:43 p.m. My phone didn't ring. It just vibrated once on the nightstand to signal a missed call. I picked it up. No caller ID. I dialed into my voicemail. "You have one new message." Beep. There was a pause. I could hear background noise. "Traffic." "Maybe," or the hum of an engine. "Stop asking about Brighthearth." The voice was male. It was not deep, not menacing in a theatrical way. It was flat, conversational. It sounded like a man ordering a sandwich. "You will make your situation worse. You have a settlement offer. Take it. Move on. It is time to let go." Click. I sat in the dark, the phone pressed to my ear. my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. It wasn't the threat that scared me. If he had screamed, if he had sworn, I would have felt the heat of his anger. I could understand anger, but this was cold. This was calm. This was business. Stop asking about Brighthearth. They knew I was asking. They knew I had called Owen. They probably knew I had met with Mara. I looked at the door of the motel room. It was a flimsy, hollow-core door with a cheap chain lock. It felt like a piece of paper protecting me from a hurricane. I replayed the message. You will make your situation worse. Worse than losing my home? Worse than losing my memories? I realized then what worse meant. They weren't talking about property anymore. They were talking about me. I stood up and dragged the heavy armchair from the corner of the room. I shoved it against the door, wedging it under the handle. Then I sat on the floor, my back against the bed, and wrapped my arms around my knees. I thought about the clean smoke detector. I thought about the reimbursement from my parents. I thought about the gray van. They wanted me to be afraid. They wanted me to take the money and disappear. Just like Mara said. I looked at the phone in my hand. I saved the voicemail. Then I emailed a copy of the audio file to Lena and another copy to a new, secret email address I had created 5 minutes ago. I was shaking. I was terrified. But as I sat there in the barricaded room, a cold, hard resolve began to crystallize in my gut. You want to talk about consequences, Dad? I whispered to the empty room. Let's talk about consequences. The sublet was a studio apartment above a garage in a part of the city where the streetlights flickered and the sidewalks were cracked by aggressive tree roots. It was technically a furnished unit, but furnished was a generous term for a collection of cast-off items that smelled of other people's lives. There was a pull-out sofa covered in a fabric that felt like burlap, a laminate table with a cigarette burn near the edge, and a lamp that buzzed like an angry insect whenever I turned it on. I moved in 3 days after checking out of the motel. My bank account was hemorrhaging money, and the $3,000 from the Butler Family Trust sat there like a radioactive isotope, untouched, glowing with guilt and suspicion. My body began to rebel against the new reality. It was a physical rejection of instability. My jaw ached constantly, a dull, grinding throb that radiated into my temples because I was clenching my teeth in my sleep. If I slept. Sleep had become a series of shallow dives into unconsciousness. Interrupted by the slightest noise, a car door slamming outside would jerk me awake, heart hammering, sweat cooling on my neck. But the worst was the toaster. On my second morning, I put 2 slices of bread into the cheap plastic toaster on the kitchenette counter. I pressed the lever down. I turned to pour coffee. When the toast popped, the smell of singed crumbs hit the heating element. It was faint, just a wisp of carbon scent. I didn't just flinch. I dropped the mug. It shattered on the linoleum, splashing hot coffee across my bare ankles. I ended up crouched in the corner of the kitchen, hands over my head, hyperventilating, while the smell of burnt bread filled the tiny room. It took me 10 minutes to stand up. It took me another 20 to sweep up the ceramic shards, my hands shaking so badly I nicked my thumb on a piece of the handle. I was 32 years old. I was an educated woman with a career in marketing copy, or I had been. Now I was a terrified animal living in a garage, afraid of breakfast appliances. This is what they don't tell you about disaster. The event ends, but the nervous system doesn't get the memo. Mara Vance picked me up on a Tuesday morning in a battered Subaru that smelled of dog hair and old fast food wrappers. "Get in," she said, clearing a stack of flyers from the passenger seat. "We are going to the county clerk's office." Mara was a force of nature contained in a 5-foot frame. She drove with one hand on the wheel and the other gesturing wildly as she explained the strategy. "We need to follow the paper. Sarah," she said, merging onto the highway without signaling. "Landlords like Renhold Residential rely on opacity. They hide behind LLCs, shell companies, and liability shields. They want you to think you are fighting a ghost, but ghosts leave footprints. At the clerk's office, under the fluorescent hum of bureaucratic lighting." Mara showed me how to navigate the public records terminals. It was tedious work. We scrolled through deed transfers, tax assessments, and mortgage filings. Here, Mara said, tapping the screen with a chipped fingernail. Look at this. I leaned in. The screen showed the property history for my building in Ashford Heights. Owner of record, Renhold Residential Group, LLC. That is them. I said, keep looking. Mara said, look at the financing. I scanned the lines of data. 6 months ago, Renhold had refinanced the property. It was a massive loan, significantly higher than the building's assessed value. They pulled equity out. Mara noted, cash out refinance. And look at this, I said, pointing to a document filed just 4 weeks before the fire. Certificate of Insurance Amendment. Renhold had updated their policy. They had switched carriers and increased the coverage limit for structure replacement by 40%. Mara let out a low whistle. That is bold, she said. Is it illegal? I asked. Not necessarily. She said, property values go up. You increase coverage. But combined with the cash-out refinance, it looks like they were preparing to liquidate the asset. If they sell the building, they get market rate. If it burns down, they get the insurance payout plus the land value. I finished. And they don't have to pay to evict anyone, Mara added grimly. The fire does the eviction for free. I stared at the screen. It was just numbers, dates and dollar signs, but translated into reality. It meant that my home had been turned into a math problem where the solution was destruction. Lena Crowell met me at a coffee shop near the sublet. She looked like she hadn't slept much more than I had. She ordered a black tea and didn't drink it. I have something, she said. She pulled a tablet from her bag and slid it across the table. It showed a photo of a heavy steel door, blackened by smoke. This is the fire door at the north end of your hallway, Lena said, the one leading to the stairwell. I nodded. We ran through that door. It is a fire-rated assembly, Lena said. It is designed to close automatically when the alarm trips, or even just under its own weight. It has a hydraulic closer at the top. Its job is to seal the floor, to stop smoke from turning the stairwell into a chimney. It didn't close? I asked. It was propped, Lena said. Propped? Like with a doorstop? No, she said, more subtle. We found a small metal wedge inserted into the hinge mechanism. It prevented the door from latching. It left a gap of about 3 inches. That is why the smoke on your floor was so dense, and why it moved so fast into the escape route. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Who would do that? Maintenance logs show the door was inspected 4 days before the fire. Lena said, the log is signed by a technician from Bright Hearth Facilities. He marked it as pass/operational, Bright Hearth again. I said, if that door had been closed, Lena said, her voice dropping, the smoke density in the stairwell would have been 50% lower. People would have been able to see. It was a trap, I whispered. It was a failure of a life safety system. Lena corrected. Ever the investigator, but a failure that defies the laws of probability. She took the tablet back. There is something else. Sarah, I requested the full vendor packet from Renhold regarding Bright Hearth. I wanted to know who these people are, and they are not just a maintenance company, she said. Bright Hearth is a doing business's name, a subsidiary. Who owns them? A firm called Grey Ridge Asset Solutions. Lena said. I froze. Grey Ridge, the name Mara had mentioned, the name the city clerk, Jonah, would later warn me about. Grey Ridge, I repeated. They market themselves as a comprehensive property risk management firm, Lena said. I looked into their client list. They work almost exclusively with distressed assets. Buildings that are about to be sold, demolished, or redeveloped. They are the cleaners, I said. Lena looked at me, her gray eyes sharp. Be careful. Sarah, if Grey Ridge is involved, this isn't just a landlord cutting corners. This is a professional operation. These people do not make mistakes. The fact that I found the wedge in the door hinge, that bothers me. Why? Because it means they either got sloppy, Lena said, or they wanted it to be found. They wanted the fire to look like negligence, not arson. Negligence is an insurance payout. Arson is a crime scene. The investigation led me to the internet, and then to the phone. I spent hours in the cramped studio, sitting on the burlap sofa, tracking the digital footprints of Grey Ridge Asset Solutions. Their website was a masterpiece of corporate vagueness, stock photos of men in hard hats pointing at blueprints, phrases like optimizing asset lifecycle and mitigating liability profiles. I called their main line, pretending to be a property manager looking for a quote. Grey Ridge Solutions. A woman answered. Her voice was smooth, polished, and utterly devoid of warmth. Hi, I said. I am calling about your maintenance services. I have a building in Ashford Heights. We don't accept unsolicited bids, she said. We work on a referral basis only. Who refers you? I asked. She hung up. I sat there, listening to the dial tone. Referral only. That evening, I went to the tenants' meeting. It was held in the basement of a local church. About 30 former residents of my building were there. The air was thick with tension and the smell of damp coats. Owen Kettler was not there. Instead, a lawyer representing Renhold Residential stood at the front of the room. He was young, slick, and wore a suit that cost more than my entire lost wardrobe. We understand your frustration, he said, holding up a hand to quiet the room. Renhold is committed to doing right by you. That is why we are expediting the return of security deposits, and as a gesture of goodwill, we are offering an additional inconvenience stipend of $1,000 per unit to anyone who signs the release form by Friday. $1,000? A man in the back shouted. I lost $20,000 worth of tools. My grandmother's photos, a woman cried. You can't pay for those. The lawyer didn't flinch. This is a voluntary offer, he said smoothly. If you choose to pursue other legal avenues, that is your right, but be aware that litigation can take years, and the outcome is never guaranteed. This money is available now, today. He placed a stack of forms on the table. I watched the room. I saw the exhaustion in my neighbors' faces. They were tired. They were broke. $1,000 was groceries. It was a deposit on a new apartment. Don't sign it, I said. Standing up, my voice shook, but I forced it louder. If you sign that, you waive your right to sue. You let them off the hook. Sarah, sit down. Someone hissed. It was Mrs. Gable from the first floor. We need the money. They increased their insurance policy right before the fire. I said, they knew this was going to happen. The lawyer looked at me. His expression was one of polite pity. Ms. Butler, he said, I understand you are traumatized. Grief makes us look for villains. But spreading conspiracy theories helps no one. We found the door propped open, I shouted. That is enough, the lawyer said. He signaled to a security guard standing by the door. I sat down, my face burning. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Mr. Henderson, the man who had told me about the cameras. He was older, his face lined with deep creases. He leaned in close. You are right, he whispered, but you are fighting gravity. Girl, what do you mean? I asked. Look at them, he said, nodding at the lawyer. They are not trying to help us. They are not even trying to fight us. They are trying to make us disappear. They just want us to scatter like dust so they can build their condos. I looked at the stack of release forms. People were already lining up to take one. That night, unable to sleep, I went digging through my own digital graveyard. I logged into my email and went to the spam folder. I was looking for anything I might have missed, any other notices, any other warnings. I searched for Renhold, nothing new. Then I searched for lease. A message popped up from 4 months ago. It had been flagged as junk because of the subject line. Opportunity. Lease buyout offer. I opened it. Dear resident, Renhold Residential is offering a limited-time relocation bonus for tenants in good standing who wish to terminate their lease early. If you vacate your unit by the 1st of next month, you will receive a cash payment of $5,000 plus a full refund of your security deposit. This offer is part of our strategic repositioning plan. I stared at the screen. $5,000. I remembered seeing the subject line months ago and deleting it without opening. I had assumed it was a scam. or just a mistake. I loved my apartment. Why would I leave? But now, reading it in the harsh blue light of my laptop, I saw it for what it was. It was the first offer. They had tried to buy us out. $5,000 a unit. If there were 40 units, that was $200,000. Cheap. But we didn't leave. We stayed. We paid our rent. We were stubborn. So they moved to Plan B. Plan B involved Bright Hearth. Plan B involved safety upgrades that disabled smoke detectors. Plan B involved a wedge in a fire door. Plan B cost them the building, but with the increased insurance, they would make a profit on the destruction, and they wouldn't have to pay us $5,000. They would pay us $1,000. If we signed the release, I felt sick. It was so calculated. It was a spreadsheet come to life, and we were the red ink being erased. I needed to talk to my parents. The deposit in my account was still there, mocking me. I called them at 10 in the morning on a Wednesday. I knew my mother would be home, probably in the sunroom with her orchids. Hello? Her voice was light, airy. Mom, it is Sarah. Sarah, she said, and the temperature in her voice dropped 10 degrees. We sent you the money. Did you get it? I got it. I said, thank you. Well, good. We hope that helps you get settled. I didn't call about the money. Mom, I need to ask you something. Sarah, I have a bridge club meeting in 20 minutes. It is about the building. I said, I found out who owns it. A company called Renhold Residential, and they use a management firm called Grey Ridge. Silence. It wasn't the silence of a dropped call. It was the silence of someone holding their breath. It stretched out for 5 seconds. 10. Mom? I said. I heard her exhale. A short, sharp sound. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because it is strange. I said, I found a connection. The company that manages your trust fund? The one you and Dad use? Adler Company. She said automatically. Yes, Adler Company. I saw a press release online. They hosted a seminar last month. A wealth preservation seminar. The keynote speaker was the CEO of Grey Ridge Asset Solutions. So? Denise said. Her voice was tight, high-pitched. Business people know each other. Sarah, that is how the world works. Did you go to that seminar? I asked. Sarah, did you? We attend many seminars, she said. Your father is very diligent about our portfolio. Mom, Grey Ridge is the company that disabled the safety systems in my building. They are the ones who made sure it burned. Stop it, she snapped. The sudden aggression in her voice startled me. You are spiraling. Sarah, she said, you are hysterical. You have been through a trauma and now you are inventing boogeymen. Grey Ridge is a respectable firm. Adler is a respectable firm. You are trying to blame everyone but yourself for your bad luck. I am not inventing anything. I said, I have the emails. I am not listening to this, she said. You need therapy. You need to stop obsessing and move on. We gave you money. We helped you. Don't throw it back in our faces with these wild accusations. She hung up. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking. She hadn't asked how Grey Ridge was involved. She hadn't asked if I was sure. She had defended them. Grey Ridge is a respectable firm. How would she know? Unless she had been told, unless she had sat in a room with plush carpet and bottled water and listened to a man in a suit explain how to maximize returns on distressed real estate. I met Lena again later that week. I told her about the parents. I told her about the seminar. It is circumstantial, Lena said, but it is interesting. She opened her folder. I have something too, she said. I received the official incident report form from Renhold today. They were required to submit their own internal findings, and it wasn't written by Owen Kettler. Lena said, and it wasn't written by their lawyer. Who wrote it? The header says, third-party risk consultant. No name, just a signature that looks like a squiggle. But the return address on the envelope? It is a P.O. box in the city. The same P.O. box listed on the invoices for Bright Hearth. They are writing their own report. I said, they are managing the narrative. Lena corrected. They are feeding the fire department a story. The The report concludes that the fire was likely caused by tenant misuse of electrical extension cords. That is a lie. I said, "Of course it is a lie," Lena said. "But it is a lie typed on professional letterhead and submitted to an overworked city department. If I wasn't the one investigating, if it was someone who just wanted to close the file, they might accept it." She looked at me. "We need to prove the link. Sarah, we need to prove that Grey Ridge isn't just a consultant, but that they were operationally in control of the building before the fire." "How?" "Permits," Lena said. "Check the permits." I didn't know how to check permits. So I went to the one person who might help. Jonah Pell was a clerk at the City Department of Buildings. Mara Vance had given me his name. "He is a good guy," she had said. "He hates the corruption. But he is too scared to shout. You have to whisper." I found Jonah at his desk, buried behind stacks of rolled-up blueprints. He was a thin man with nervous eyes and ink-stained fingers. "Mr. Pell?" I asked. He jumped. "Can I help you?" "I am Sarah Butler. Mara Vance sent me." He looked around quickly. Then he lowered his voice. "Keep it down. What do you need?" "I need to see the permit history for 402 Oak Street, the Ashford Heights building that burned." He typed into his computer. He frowned. "That is odd," he said. "What?" "There are no permits for the last 3 years," he said. "No electrical, no plumbing, nothing. But they did work," I said. "They did safety upgrades." Jonah shook his head. "Not legally. They didn't. If they didn't pull a permit, the work wasn't inspected." He kept typing. Then he stopped. "Wait," he said. "Here is one. Filed yesterday." "Yesterday?" "The building is a ruin. It is a demolition permit." Jonah said, "Expedited approval. Who filed it?" "Grey Ridge Asset Solutions." He read, "Acting as agent for owner." He looked up at me. "They appear on the permits after the fire," he said softly. "That is their pattern. I have seen this name before. They come in for the demo. They come in for the site clearance. They are the undertakers." "If they are the undertakers," I said, "then who killed the building?" Jonah adjusted his glasses. He looked terrified. "Ms. Butler," he said, "if Grey Ridge is filing for demolition this fast, they want that building gone. They want the evidence gone. If I were you, I would find whatever you need to find now. Once the bulldozers start, the story is over." I walked out of the city building into the bright, blinding sun. The clock was ticking. They were going to bulldoze the site. They were going to grind the melted smoke detector and the propped fire door into dust and haul it away to a landfill. I needed to make the connection stick. I needed to tie my parents to Renhold, and Renhold to Grey Ridge, and Grey Ridge to the fire. I went back to the studio. I pulled up the website for the financial advisory firm, Adler Company. I found the page for their wealth preservation seminar. There was a gallery of photos from past events. I scrolled through them, men in tuxedos, women in gowns, and there, in a photo from a gala sponsored by Renhold Residential 6 months ago, I saw them, Mark and Denise Butler. My father was holding a champagne flute. My mother was laughing, her head thrown back. They looked happy. They looked rich. And standing next to them, with a hand on my father's shoulder, was a man I recognized from the Grey Ridge website, the CEO. I zoomed in. My father was wearing a name tag. Under his name, it didn't say guest. It said Investor Circle. I felt the air leave the room. They weren't just attendees. They were investors. My parents had put money into a fund. That fund invested in Renhold. Renhold hired Grey Ridge. Grey Ridge burned my home. And then my parents sent me $3,000 from the profits. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I sat on the cold tile floor, wiping my mouth. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't crazy. My parents didn't just refuse to help me because of boundaries. They refused to help me because admitting the truth would mean admitting they were part of the machine that destroyed me. It was a thin line, a financial line. But it was a line that reached all the way from the ashes of my apartment to their manicured living room. And I was going to pull on it until the whole house of cards came down. The offices of Adler Company were located on the 44th floor of a Glass Needle in the financial district. a building that seemed designed to look down on the rest of the world. The elevator ride was smooth and silent, the kind of silence that cost money. When the doors slid open, the air pressure changed, popping my ears. Mara Vance stood beside me, adjusting the strap of her canvas bag. She looked out of place in her denim jacket and scuffed boots, a smudge of rebellion against the polished marble and limestone of the lobby. I felt out of place too, but for different reasons. I was wearing the best clothes I had left, a pair of black slacks I had bought at a thrift store and a blouse that was slightly too tight across the shoulders. I felt like an imposter. I felt like I was wearing a costume. We approached the reception desk. It was a monolith of white quartz, behind which sat a woman who looked more like a curator than a receptionist. "Can I help you?" she asked. She did not smile. Her gaze flickered over Mara's buttons. "Housing is a human right," and settled on my face with a look of mild distaste. "We are here to inquire about a client," Mara said, leaning her elbows on the quartz. "We are conducting research regarding a property investment fund managed by this firm. We do not discuss client lists with the public," the woman said. Her voice was as smooth and cold as the counter. "We are not asking for a list," I said. I stepped forward. My heart was thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "I want to know about the connection between Adler Code and Renhold Residential. Specifically, the wealth preservation seminar you hosted 6 months ago." The receptionist didn't blink. "I am afraid I cannot help you. If you do not have an appointment, I will have to ask you to leave." She reached for the phone on her desk. It was a subtle threat, a gesture that said security without saying the word. I looked around the lobby. It was designed to intimidate. It was designed to make you feel small, to make you feel like your problems, your burnt apartment, your lost life, were trivial in the face of this immense, accumulated wealth. And then I saw it, on the far wall, past a sculpture that looked like twisted chrome. There was a series of framed photographs. They were large, black and white prints, artfully lit by track lighting. They depicted the firm's charitable endeavors. Adler Company, giving back. I walked past the desk. "Ma'am, you cannot go back there," the receptionist called out, her voice rising. I ignored her. I walked straight to the third photograph in the row. It was a picture of a gala. The caption at the bottom read, "Annual Housing Initiative Gala, sponsored by Renhold Residential and Grey Ridge Asset Solutions." The photo was wide, capturing a crowd of people in tuxedos and gowns, laughing, holding crystal flutes. In the center of the frame, smiling at the camera, were the CEO of Grey Ridge and a man I didn't know, but to the left, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, were my parents, Mark and Denise Butler. My father was leaning in to say something to a woman wearing a diamond necklace. My mother was holding her clutch bag with both hands, her posture perfect, her face composed in a mask of polite social engagement. I had seen the digital version online, grainy and small, but seeing it here, printed on archival paper, framed in mahogany, hanging in the physical heart of the beast, hit me with the force of a physical blow. They were here. They had walked this floor. They had drunk the wine. They had shaken the hands. They weren't just investors on a spreadsheet. They were part of the club. "Ma'am." A security guard had appeared from a side door. He was large, wearing a blazer that struggled to contain his shoulders. "We are leaving," Mara said, grabbing my arm. "Sarah, we are leaving." I couldn't take my eyes off the photo. My parents looked so clean. That was the thing that made me feel physically sick. A nausea that roiled in my gut. They looked immaculate. There was no soot on their hands. There was no smoke in their hair. They were insulated by layers of money and plausible deniability, standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who had turned my home into a blast furnace. "Sarah," Mara hissed. I turned away. I let her pull me toward the elevator. As the doors closed, cutting off the view of the quartz desk and the angry receptionist, I leaned against the metal wall and closed my eyes. "They knew." I whispered. "They didn't just refuse to help." Mara said softly, "They refused to get dirty." 2 days later, Lena Crowell called me to her office. It was a small, cramped room in the basement of the municipal building, smelling of old paper and stale coffee, the polar opposite of Adler Company. She turned her monitor so I could see the screen. "I had to pull a favor with a business owner down the street from your building," Lena said, a dry cleaner. His security camera points toward the alleyway. Not the main street. The police missed it because they were only looking at the front entrance. She clicked play. The timestamp on the video was 2:14 in the morning, the night of the fire. The image was grainy, black and white, but clear enough, a narrow alleyway lined with dumpsters. A van pulled into the frame. It was a dark panel van. Ford or Chevy, it was hard to tell. It moved slowly. Lights off. It stopped near the service entrance of my building. The driver's door opened. A figure got out. He was wearing coveralls and a baseball cap pulled low. He walked to the back of the van and opened the doors. He pulled out something heavy, a canister or a tank. He disappeared into the shadow of the building's service door. He was gone for 12 minutes. Lena said. She fast-forwarded the video. The figure reappeared, empty-handed. He got back in the van. The van reversed out of the alley. Lena paused the video as the van turned. The brake lights illuminated the side of the vehicle for a split second. "There," Lena said, pointing with a pen. "Look at the door." I squinted. There was a logo. It was faint, just a ghost of a decal. But I could make out the shape, a stylized shield with a mountain peak inside it. "Gray Ridge." I said, "It matches the logo on their letterhead." Lena said, "But they said they weren't on site." I said, "Owen Kettler said they hadn't been there in weeks. They lied." Lena said flatly, "This footage places a Gray Ridge vehicle at the point of origin less than 1 hour before the first 911 call." "Is this enough?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Is this enough to arrest them?" "It is enough to shift the conversation," Lena said. "But Sarah, listen to me. Proving presence is not proving intent. Their lawyers will say he was dropping off supplies. They will say he was doing an emergency check on the boiler. They will have a work order forged and dated for that night before the sun comes up tomorrow." "But the canister," I said, "the accelerant. We can't see what is in the canister." Lena said, "It could be cleaning fluid. It could be refrigerant." She rubbed her temples. "The official cause is trending toward undetermined," she said. "But privately, my boss is starting to use the word intentional. We are getting close to calling it arson, so we get them." I said. Lena looked at me, and her expression was not triumphant. It was sad. "Sarah, powerful parties like Gray Ridge and Renhold, they don't bet on being innocent. They bet on exhaustion. They bet on you running out of money, running out of anger, running out of time. They will bury us in paper. They will delay hearings. They will make this take 5 years. I don't care." I said, "I have time." "Do you?" Lena asked gently. "Look at yourself." I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. I had lost 10 pounds since the fire. My skin was pale and drawn. They are counting on you breaking. Sarah, that is their strategy. It is not a legal strategy. It is a war of attrition. The strategy of attrition arrived in my mailbox the next day. It was a thick envelope from the legal offices of Bannister, Croft Associates, representing Renhold Residential Group. I sat on the burlap sofa in my sublet and tore it open. Settlement agreement and release of all claims. The document was 20 pages long. I flipped through the dense legalese until I found the numbers. In consideration of the sum of $15,000, $15,000, it was more than the $1,000 they had offered the other tenants. It was enough to replace my furniture. It was enough to put a deposit on a decent apartment, but then I read the conditions. The undersigned agrees to keep the terms of this agreement confidential. The undersigned agrees to refrain from making any disparaging remarks, public statements, or social media posts regarding Renhold Residential, Gray Ridge Asset Solutions, or their affiliates. And then, on page 4, the clause that made my blood boil. While the cause of the fire remains undetermined, initial reports suggest that the improper use of unsafe personal electronics by residents may have been a contributing factor. This settlement is offered as a gesture of goodwill and does not constitute an admission of liability. Unsafe personal electronics. They were blaming us. They were blaming me. They were suggesting that because I owned a laptop or a toaster, I was responsible for the inferno that had destroyed my life. They were trying to convert my grief into shame. They wanted me to sign a piece of paper that said, essentially, I might have done this, so I will take your charity and shut up. I threw the papers across the room. They fluttered to the floor like dead birds. I called my friend, Jessica. She had been letting me do laundry at her place. 15,000? Jessica said over the phone. Sarah, that is a lot of money right now. It is hush money. Jess, I said, they are blaming us for the fire in the contract. Does it matter what the contract says? She asked. It is just words. You need to live. You need to get out of that garage. You are killing yourself over this crusade. It is not a crusade. I said, it is the truth. Truth doesn't pay rent. Sarah, take the money. Sign the paper. Start over. We miss the old you. The you that wasn't. Obsessed. I hung up. I understood her. I did. Survival is practical. Survival is taking the check and buying a new bed and pretending the world is a safe place. But if I signed that paper, I would be agreeing with them. I would be saying that it was okay to burn down a building for profit as long as you paid the victims $15,000 to stay quiet. If I signed that paper, I would be complicit. I would be one of them. My phone buzzed. A text message. From Dad. Your mother and I think it is time for a calm talk. Please come over for tea on Sunday, 2 p.m. A calm talk. The phrasing was so specific. It implied that all our previous talks had been hysterical, chaotic, unreasonable. It implied that I was the one who needed to be managed. I stared at the screen. I wanted to say no. I wanted to block the number. But I thought about the photo in the Adler office. I thought about the settlement offer. I thought about the Gray Ridge van. I needed to look them in the eye. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house at exactly 2 o'clock. The lawn was freshly mowed, the stripes in the grass perfectly parallel. The white siding gleamed in the afternoon sun. It was a fortress of suburban perfection. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. Yes, but I didn't look crazy. I put on a touch of lipstick, a shade called Battle Red that I used to wear for big client pitches. I am not crazy. I whispered. I got out of the car. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing a cashmere cardigan and pearls. Sarah, she said, you're on time. She didn't hug me. She stepped back to let me in. The house smelled of lemon polish and silence. We walked into the living room. My father was sitting in his leather armchair, reading a tablet. He stood up when I entered. Hello. Sarah, he said. He gestured to the sofa. Please, sit. I sat. On the coffee table. There was a tea service set out. Silver pot, porcelain cups, a plate of biscuits. But there were other things on the table too. There was a notepad with a list of bullet points written in my father's precise, architectural handwriting. And next to the teapot, positioned deliberately, was a business card. I leaned forward to read it. Edgar H. Sterling, Esquire, estate planning liability, their lawyer. They had lawyered up for a cup of tea with their daughter. I see you came prepared, I said, nodding at the card. We just want to make sure everyone is on the same page. Mark said. He poured the tea. His hand was steady. What page is that? I asked. The page where I sign the NDA and disappear? Sarah, please, Denise said. We agreed to keep this civil. I am being civil. I said, I haven't raised my voice. I am just asking a question. Did you know about the settlement offer? Mark took a sip of his tea. He placed the cup down carefully. We are aware that Renhold is making offers to the tenants. He said, it seems like a generous path forward. Did you know Gray Ridge was going to burn the building, I asked? The room went dead silent. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked loudly. Mark sighed. He looked at Denise, then back at me. He had the expression of a man dealing with a difficult employee. Sarah, we need to clarify something. He said, we are investors. We put our money into a diversified real estate fund managed by Adler Company. That fund, the Horizon Growth Fund, holds stakes in dozens of companies. One of them happens to be a shell that holds equity in Renhold. So you admit it. I said, you are invested in them. It is an indirect investment. Mark said, we don't sit on the board. We don't make operational decisions. We don't know who the maintenance contractors are. To suggest that we had any prior knowledge of an event is legally slanderous and morally repugnant. Risk containment. I thought, he isn't denying the connection. He is managing the liability. But you stayed in. I said, after the fire, after I called you from the shelter, you didn't pull your money out. You put more in. That was an automated portfolio rebalancing, Mark said smoothly. The fund performed well. The algorithm purchased more shares. It wasn't a personal decision against you. It was math. Math, I repeated. My life burned down because of math. Sarah, Denise cut in. Her voice was softer, but it had a steely edge. This isn't about the money. This is about you. Me? You have always been dramatic, she said. Since you were a child, you feel things very deeply, and that is fine, but you have always struggled with boundaries. You want us to be responsible for your happiness. You want us to rescue you. I wanted a couch to sleep on, I said. I wanted my parents to say they were sorry I lost everything. And we did. She said, we sent you $3,000. We offered you advice, but you rejected it. You wanted us to bleed for you. And when we didn't, you invented this conspiracy theory to punish us. I stared at her. She was rewriting history in real time. She was using the language of therapy, boundaries, responsibility, to justify absolute emotional abandonment. You are protecting yourselves. I said, we are protecting our peace, Denise said, and we are protecting our future. We have worked hard for what we have. Sarah, we are not going to let your crisis destroy our retirement. I looked at the tea. I hadn't touched it. It was cold now, a film forming on the surface. I looked at the lawyer's card. I looked at my father, who was watching me with eyes that were calculating the probability of a lawsuit. I realized then that there was no breaking through. There was no magic combination of words that would make them see me as a daughter instead of a liability. To them, I was a bad investment. I was a volatility risk, and my mother wasn't protecting a relationship. She was protecting her identity. She needed to be right. She needed to be the good mother with the difficult daughter, because the alternative, that she was a cold, complicit woman who chose money over her own child, was too heavy to bear. I stood up. Sarah? Mark said, we haven't finished the talking points. I think we have. I said. I picked up my purse. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. A strange calm settled over me. It was the calm of the dead. I am not going to sign the NDA. I said, that would be a mistake. Mark said warningly, maybe, I said, but it will be my mistake, not yours. I walked to the door. Sarah, Denise called after me. If you walk out now, don't expect us to be here when you crash. I stopped. I turned back one last time. I don't. Mom, I said, I really don't. I walked out. I closed the heavy front door behind me. The latch clicked with a sound like a guillotine dropping. I walked to my car. The suburban street was quiet. A dog barked in the distance. I got into the driver's seat. I put the key in the ignition, but I couldn't turn it. My hand was shaking so hard the keys jingled. The shaking spread up my arm, into my chest. My teeth started to chatter. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands, squeezing until my knuckles turned white. Trying to hold myself together, the grief hit me then. Not for the apartment, but for them. For the parents I had wanted, and the strangers I had just left. They were gone. They had never really existed. I took a deep breath. I stared at the perfectly manicured lawn. I'm not crazy, I whispered. I said it again. Louder. I'm not crazy. They wanted me to doubt my reality. They wanted me to think I was spiraling. But I had seen the photos. I had seen the van. I had seen the email. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. "I am not crazy," I said, "and I am coming for you." The decision to fight was not a lightning bolt of inspiration. It was a slow hardening of the spirit, like concrete setting in the rain. I realized that I could either be the woman who took $15,000 to forget her life, or I could be the woman who burned her own safety net to find the truth. I chose the fire. I needed allies who weren't afraid of scorch marks. Mara Vance came through 2 days after my disastrous tea with my parents. She drove me to a brownstone in a neighborhood that was halfway between gentrified and gritty, pointing to a peeling brass plaque next to a garden-level door. "Calvin Brenner, attorney at law. He is not fancy," Mara warned me as we walked down the steps. "If you are expecting law and order, lower your expectations. But he hates bullies, and he knows tenant law better than he knows his own family." Cal Brenner's office looked like a paper factory had exploded inside a library. Stacks of files covered every surface: the desk, the chairs, the radiator. Cal himself was a man in his 50s with wild gray hair and a coffee stain on his tie that looked like a permanent design feature. He cleared a stack of depositions off a chair and gestured for me to sit. "Mara says you are stubborn," Cal said. He didn't say hello. He just looked at me over the top of reading glasses that were missing a screw. "I am not stubborn," I said. "I am angry." "Good," Cal said. "Anger is fuel. Sadness is just sand in the gears. Tell me what you have." I laid it out. The emails from the fake domain, the smoke detector, the Grey Ridge van video, the connection between my parents, Adler Company, and Renhold. Cal listened, chewing on the end of a pen. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back, the chair groaning under his weight. "Here's the reality. Sarah," he said, "you are going up against a vertically integrated machine. Renhold owns the building. Grey Ridge manages the risk. Adler manages the money. They have resources that make your $15,000 settlement offer look like lunch money. So we can't win?" I asked. "I didn't say that," Cal said. "I said they have resources. We have something else. We have the fact that they are arrogant." He pulled a folder from the chaos on his desk. "I did a little digging before you got here," he said. "Public filings are beautiful things if you know where to look." I pulled the master service agreement between Renhold and Grey Ridge. It was filed as an exhibit in an unrelated lawsuit 3 years ago. He flipped the folder open. "Look at the scope of services," he said. I read the highlighted text: site security, maintenance, risk assessment. "Keep reading," Cal said. "Clause 4.2. Incident response and reputational mitigation." It sounded corporate and boring. "What does it mean?" I asked. "It means they were hired to handle the PR before there was even a PR problem," Cal said. "You don't hire a firm for reputational mitigation regarding a specific property unless you anticipate a reputation-damaging event. They weren't just fixing toilets. Sarah, they were preparing a narrative. They knew." I said, "They anticipated." Cal corrected. "Lawyers are precise. They anticipated a loss event. And look at the insurance update." He pulled another paper. Renhold increased their coverage limits 20 days before the fire. "That is tight. Suspiciously tight. So we sue them?" I asked. "We sue them for negligence," Cal said. "We sue them for breach of habitability, and we use the discovery process to force them to hand over their internal emails. That is where the smoking gun usually lives, in a reply-all chain where some middle manager says something stupid. But I have to warn you," Cal said, his expression darkening. "Warn me about what?" "They will come for you. Sarah, not with guns, with character assassination. They will look at your medical records. They will find out you take anxiety medication. They will interview your ex-boyfriends. They will paint you as unstable, paranoid, a woman who is spiraling, to borrow your mother's word. They already are." I said, "It will get worse," Cal said. "If we file this suit, you become a public figure in their eyes, a target. Can you handle that?" I thought about the night of the fire. I thought about the strangers guiding each other down the stairs. I thought about the man who told me they were trying to make us disappear. I don't have a reputation to protect anymore. I said, I just want them to answer the question. What question? Cal asked. Why my home had to die so their portfolio could live. Cal smiled. It was a sharp, wolfish grin. Okay, he said. Let's go to war. While Cal prepared the civil filing, Lena Crowell was fighting the battle of chemistry. I met her at the impound lot where they were keeping the debris from the fire. It was a grim place, smelling of wet rust and ash. We stood near a pile of charred wood that used to be the third-floor hallway. The lab results are back on the samples from the service closet. Lena said. She handed me a report. It was dense with scientific notation, but the summary was clear. Positive for methyl ethyl ketone, MEK, and toluene. These are industrial solvents, Lena said. You use them for stripping paint or thinning heavy-duty epoxy. They are highly flammable. They have a low flash point, which means they ignite easily at room temperature. Could a tenant have had them? I asked. A gallon of it? Lena shook her head. Maybe if you were running an auto body shop out of your apartment, but these concentrations were found soaked into the subfloor inside the locked service closet. Tenants don't have keys to that closet. Only maintenance does. I said. Bright hearth? Exactly, Lena said. And here's the kicker. MEK burns hot and fast. It accelerates the spread, but it evaporates quickly. If the fire department had been 5 minutes slower, the heat would have consumed all the evidence. They timed it. I said. They tried to. Lena said, but the fire door, the one that was propped open? Yes. It created a draft. It pulled the fire into the stairwell faster than they expected, but it also pulled fresh air in. It created a ventilation tunnel that actually cooled the core of the fire near the closet, just enough to preserve the floorboards. Their sabotage backfired. I said, physics is a tricky accomplice, Lena said grimly. So we have proof of an accelerant. We have proof of access. We have pieces of a puzzle, Lena said, but we need a face. I can say maintenance crew, but a defense attorney will say rogue employee. We need to prove that the order to use that solvent came from the top. The face arrived 3 days later, not in a courtroom, but on a park bench in the rain. I had received an email on the secure account I set up. The subject line was simply, I know about the van. The body of the email gave a time and a location. No name. I went. I sat on the wet wood of a bench near the duck pond, holding a cold cup of coffee. I waited for 20 minutes, checking my watch, wondering if this was another trap, another game by Grayridge to mess with my head. Then a woman sat down on the other end of the bench. She was young, maybe 25. She wore a heavy coat and a beanie pulled down low. She didn't look at me. She threw a piece of bread to a duck. Don't look at me, she said quietly. Okay, I said. I stared straight ahead at the gray water. You are the woman from the news, she said, the one asking questions. I am Sarah. My name is Tessa. She said, I used to work for Grayridge, in the dispatch office. Used to? I quit 2 months ago, after a different job. Tell me. Tessa. She threw another piece of bread. Her hand was shaking. They don't call it arson, she said. Her voice was so low I had to lean in to hear her over the sound of the rain. They call it asset acceleration, or controlled loss. Controlled loss. I repeated. The bureaucratic coldness of the term made me shiver. It is a package, Tessa said. The landlord buys the distress management tier. Grayridge sends in a team. They degrade the systems first, disable the alarms, clog the sprinklers. They make it look like incompetence. And then? Then they wait for a window. Tessa said, a cold night when everyone has heaters on, or a storm. Plausible deniability. Then a team goes in. They use solvents. They say they are stripping the floors or cleaning the boiler. They leave rags. They leave hazards. And then a spark? I asked. Sometimes a timer. She said, sometimes just bad wiring they forgot to fix. Why are you telling me this? Tessa turned to me then. Her face was pale. Her eyes rimmed with red. She looked terrified. Because I saw the work order for your building, she said. It was coded Level 4 clearance. That means total wipeout. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it along the bench toward me. "This is a copy of the dispatch log from that night," she said. "It shows the van leaving the depot at 1 in the morning. The driver is listed as Contractor 89. Who is Contractor 89? I don't know." She said, "They keep the wet work guys anonymous. But look at the supervisor's signature at the bottom." I looked at the paper. The signature was a jagged scrawl. "That is the regional director," Tessa said. "He signed off on the van. He knew." "Why are you scared?" "Tessa?" I asked. "Because they know I downloaded this," she said. She stood up abruptly. "I have to go. I can't meet you again." "Wait," I said. "Will you testify?" She looked at me like I was insane. "Testify?" she said. "They will kill me, or they will ruin me so bad I will wish I was dead." "You don't understand. Sarah, these aren't landlords. They are sharks in suits." She walked away, disappearing into the mist and the rain. I sat there, clutching the damp piece of paper, feeling the weight of her fear settling onto my own shoulders. That night, the fear came for me too. I sat in my studio apartment, listening to the wind rattle the loose window pane. I looked at the dispatch log Tessa had given me. I looked at the lab report Lena had given me. I had the truth, but truth is heavy. I looked at my bank balance. I had $400 left. The rent was due in a week. If I continued with Cal, I would have to pay filing fees. I would have to pay for depositions. I would be broke. I would be living in my car. And for what? To prove a point? My friends were telling me to stop. My parents had disowned me. I was alone in a drafty garage, fighting a billion-dollar corporation. I could still take the settlement. I could call the lawyer, apologize, sign the paper, and get the $15,000. I could move to a different city. I could start over. I closed my eyes and imagined it. The relief of letting go, the quiet. But then I imagined the next building. I imagined Gray Ridge moving on to the next distressed asset. I imagined another Tessa typing up a work order. I imagined another Sarah waking up to the smell of smoke, grabbing her shoes, running for her life. If I stopped, I would be safe, but I would always know. I would always wonder if the next fire, the next death, was on my hands because I was too tired to hold the line. I opened my laptop. I wasn't going to quit, but I needed to know exactly who I was fighting. I logged into the county clerk's portal again. I wanted to look at the financial side. I went to the records for the Horizon Growth Fund, the one my father had mentioned. It was a pooled investment fund. The details were obscure, but there was a quarterly filing update posted just yesterday. I downloaded it. I searched for Butler. I didn't expect to find anything. Individual investors usually aren't listed in the top-level summaries unless they are major shareholders. But there it was. Not under Butler, but under a family LLC my father used for tax purposes. Blue Spruce Holdings. I looked at the transaction date, 3 days after the fire. I looked at the transaction type, additional capital contribution. I looked at the amount, $200,000. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. They hadn't just let the algorithm run. You don't accidentally move $200,000. That requires a signature. That requires a wire transfer authorization. My parents had seen the fire. They had seen the devastation. And then, 3 days later, they had looked at the market performance of the fund, which was likely spiking because of the insurance claim and the land value bump, and they had doubled down. They had bet against me. They had bet on the fire. The $3,000 they sent me? That wasn't charity. That was a rounding error. That was the crumbs from the table while they feasted on the disaster. I didn't call them. I drove to the country club. I knew it was Wednesday night. Wednesday night was prime rib night. Mark and Denise never missed prime rib night. I walked into the dining room. I was wearing my jeans and my thrift store coat. The hostess tried to stop me. "Ma'am, members only," she said. "I am visiting family." I said, and I walked past her. I saw them at their usual table by the window, overlooking the golf course. My father was cutting his meat. My mother was holding a glass of red wine. They looked peaceful. They looked civilized. I walked up to the table. Sarah, my mother said, startled. Her hand jerked, splashing a drop of wine onto the white tablecloth. What are you doing here? You look... I slammed the printout of the financial transaction onto the table, right next to the butter dish. Explain this, I said. My father looked at the paper. He didn't flinch. He chewed his steak, swallowed, and wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. This is private financial data. Sarah, he said, how did you get this? It is a public filing. Dad, you got sloppy. You moved $200,000 into the Horizon Fund 3 days after I almost burned to death. Mark sighed. He picked up his wine glass. Sarah, you don't understand how markets work, he said. The fund was undervalued. The fire, as tragic as it was, created a liquidity event for the underlying asset. It was a buy signal. A buy signal? I asked, my voice rising. People lost everything. Mrs. Higgins lost her cat. I lost my home. And you saw a buy signal? Lower your voice, Denise hissed, looking around at the other diners. You are making a scene. I don't care about the scene, I said. I care that my parents are profiteers. I care that you looked at my pain and saw a profit margin. We didn't cause the fire, Mark said. His voice was hard now. We didn't light the match. Sarah. We didn't tell anyone to burn the building. We just responded to market conditions. That is what smart money does. We didn't light the match. The words hung in the air between us. I looked at him. I looked at his manicured hands. I looked at the expensive suit. You think that matters? I asked quietly. You think because you didn't hold the gasoline can, you are innocent? You funded the people who did. You gave them the capital to buy the solvents. You gave them the incentive to clear the building. That is an abstraction, Mark said. No. I said, it is reality. You live your whole life with clean hands. Dad, but you are fine with dirty outcomes as long as you don't have to smell the smoke. I grabbed the paperback from the table. I am done. I said, I am not your daughter anymore. I am just a liability you failed to contain. I turned and walked out. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I could feel the silence of the dining room. But for the first time, I didn't feel the shame. I felt light. I had lost my parents. Yes, but I had found myself. The next morning, Cal filed the motion. Emergency motion for preservation of evidence and temporary restraining order. We argued that the demolition of the building would constitute the destruction of a crime scene. We argued that the structural debris held vital chemical evidence. Renhold's lawyers fought it. They screamed about carrying costs and public safety hazards. They claimed the building was unstable and had to come down immediately, but the judge, a stern woman who seemed tired of corporate theatrics, looked at the lab report Lena had provided. She looked at the affidavit regarding the propped fire door. Motion granted. She ruled. The structure stands until the investigation is complete. No demolition, no removal of debris. It was a small victory. The building was still a ruin. I was still homeless, but the bulldozers had to turn off their engines. We bought time, Cal said as we walked out of the courthouse. Now we use it. I said, Lena called me that afternoon. I have a name. She said, for contractor 89? No, for the subcontractor who hired him. Bright Hearth is a shell. Sarah, we knew that. But the payments for the special maintenance crew? They went to a company called Apex Remediation. And who owns Apex? It is registered to a P.O. box in New Jersey. Lena said, but I ran the name of the registered agent. It is a man named Silas Vane. The name sounded like a villain from a bad novel. Who is Silas Vane? He is a former private military contractor. Lena said, he used to work for Grey Ridge in their overseas division. He is their fixer. Sarah, when they need something done that is off the books. They call Silas. Can we find him? I am trying, Lena said. But guys like this, they are ghosts. He isn't a ghost, I said, thinking of my new resolve. He is a man, and men leave trails. I went back to my studio. I took the burlap sofa and pushed it against the wall. I went to the office supply store and bought a corkboard, a box of pushpins, and 3 red markers. I hung the board on the wall. I pinned up the photo of the fire. I pinned up the melted smoke detector. I pinned up the email from the Panama domain. I pinned up the Gray Ridge logo. I pinned up the photo of my parents at the gala. I pinned up the dispatch log Tessa had given me. I wrote Silas Vane on an index card and pinned it to the center. I started a notebook. The War Binder. Page 1. Timeline of events. Page 2. Financial connections. Page 3. The lies. I recorded every call. I transcribed every voicemail. I pasted in every email. They wanted to gaslight me. They wanted to tell me I was crazy, that I was imagining things, that it was just an accident, just unsafe electronics. I would make that impossible. I would build a wall of facts so high and so thick that they couldn't climb over it. I looked at the board. It was a map of my trauma, but it was also a map of their crimes. I picked up the red marker. I drew a line from my parents to Renhold. I drew a line from Renhold to Gray Ridge. I drew a line from Gray Ridge to Silas Vane. Everything is connected, I whispered, and I'm going to pull the string. I sat down at the table, opened a fresh page in the binder, and wrote the date. Day 24, post-fire. Status, still standing. Next move, find Silas Vane. My jaw still ached. My hands still trembled when I smelled toast. But the fear was different now. It wasn't the paralyzing fear of the victim. It was the adrenaline of the hunter. I picked up my phone and dialed Cal. Cal, I said. Yeah? We need to subpoena Silas Vane. I said. Who? The man who lit the match, I said. There was a silence on the line. Then I heard the smile in Cal's voice. Spell it for me, he said. I spelled it out, letter by letter. Each letter felt like a nail in their coffin. Let's get him, Cal said. I hung up. I looked at the board. Not our problem. My father had said. I stared at the red lines connecting the money to the fire. I was going to make it their problem. I was going to make it everyone's problem. The hearing took place in room 4B of the Municipal Administrative Building, a windowless box that smelled of floor wax and recycled air. It was a sterile theater for the dismantling of a life. I sat at a long laminate table next to Cal Brenner. On the other side of the room sat the representatives for Renhold Residential, 3 men in navy suits who looked like they had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in arrogance. Next to them was the counsel for Gray Ridge Asset Solutions, a woman with hair so tight against her scalp it looked painful, typing furiously on a tablet. My parents were there too. I had asked Cal to ensure they were notified. They sat in the back row of the small public gallery, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the scattering of displaced tenants who had taken off work to be here. My father, Mark, wore his country club blazer. My mother, Denise, kept adjusting her silk scarf, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped bird. They were not there to support me. They were there to manage the optics. I did not look at them. I kept my eyes on the binder in front of me. The War Binder. It was 3 inches thick now, tabbed and color-coded. Ms. Butler, the presiding hearing officer said. He was a gray-faced man named Commissioner Halloway, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. We are here to review the findings regarding the fire at 402 Oak Street and to determine the status of the demolition permit. You may proceed. I am not the loudest voice in this room. I thought, but I am the only one who knows the truth. I nodded to Cal. We call Investigator Lena Crowell to present the preliminary findings. Cal said. Lena stood up. She walked to the podium with a heavy box of evidence. She didn't look tired today. She looked dangerous. She laid out the photos. This is the smoke detector retrieved from the hallway outside Unit 305, Lena said. Her voice was cool, detached, the voice of science. As you can see, the exterior housing is charred. However, the interior backplate is pristine white. She held up the plastic shell in an evidence bag. For the interior to remain clean during a structural fire of this magnitude, the cover had to have been opened prior to ignition. Lena continued. Furthermore, the battery compartment was empty. There was no battery found in the debris radius. She placed the bag down and picked up another photo. This is the fire door on the 3rd floor. Note the hinge mechanism. We recovered a steel wedge, consistent with a tool used for door hanging. driven into the jam. This prevented the door from closing. This is a direct violation of fire code and life safety protocols. It allowed the smoke to funnel into the stairwell, blinding the residents during evacuation. The Gray Ridge lawyer stood up. Objection. This is speculation. A tenant could have propped that door. We have maintenance logs, Lena said, cutting her off. Signed by Bright Hearth Facilities 4 days prior. The door was marked as inspected and functional. If a tenant propped it, the daily sweep should have caught it. There was no record of a violation. She moved to the video. The room went quiet as the grainy footage played on the large monitor on the wall. The dark van, the alleyway, the figure carrying the canister. We have identified this vehicle as belonging to the fleet of Gray Ridge Asset Solutions, Lena said. Despite the company's statement that they had no personnel on site for 2 weeks prior to the event, this footage places their vehicle at the point of origin 1 hour before ignition. The Gray Ridge lawyer looked bored. A vehicle in an alley is not a crime, she said. It is when the vehicle leaves 12 minutes later, and the building starts burning 40 minutes after that, Cal said. The air in the room shifted. It wasn't a dramatic gasp. It was a tightening. The narrative of unfortunate accident was dissolving. The narrative of unsafe personal electronics was evaporating. We are seeing a pattern, Lena said, addressing the commissioner. Tampered safety devices, disabled cameras, presence of industrial accelerants. This was not negligence. This was a prepared environment. Then came the wild card. Call Tessa Rourke, Cal said. The door at the back of the room opened. Tessa walked in. She looked small in a gray sweater that was too big for her. She was trembling. I could see her hands shaking at her sides. She walked to the witness chair. She didn't look at the Gray Ridge table. She looked at me. I nodded. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. You are safe. State your name and former occupation. Cal said. Tessa Rourke, she whispered. I was a dispatch coordinator for Gray Ridge Asset Solutions. Speak up, please, the commissioner said. Tessa took a breath. I was a dispatch coordinator. I handled work orders for the Special Projects Division. And what is the Special Projects Division? Cal asked. It is what they call the Distress Management Team, Tessa said. Her voice gained a little strength. When a landlord wants to clear a building, when they want to accelerate the asset life cycle. Can you explain how that works? We would get a list, Tessa said, target properties. The first step was always system degradation. We would schedule maintenance to disable the alarms. We called it sensor calibration. Then we would schedule a camera outage. We would tell the tenants it was a server upgrade. And the fire at 402 Oak Street? Cal asked. I saw the work order, Tessa said. It was coded level 4. That means total clearance. I saw the van assignment. It was signed by the regional director. The Gray Ridge lawyer was on her feet. This is absurd. This witness is a disgruntled former employee who was terminated for cause. She has no credibility. She is fabricating stories to exact revenge. I have the dispatch log, Tessa said. She pulled the folded paper from her pocket. I printed it before they locked me out of the system. She said, It shows the van. It shows the code. It shows the signature. She handed it to the clerk. The room was silent. The Gray Ridge lawyer sat down slowly. Her face was a mask of fury. Then they came for me. Ms. Butler, the Gray Ridge lawyer said, turning her attention to me. She didn't smile. She looked at me like I was something she had scraped off her shoe. You have had a difficult year, haven't you? I have, I said. You have a history of anxiety, correct? You are currently medicated for it? I am, I said. And you have a strained relationship with your family? In fact, your parents are here today, and I understand they have refused to support your theories regarding this fire. My parents are here, I said. That is correct. Isn't it true, Ms. Butler, that you are motivated by resentment? You lost your home, which is tragic, but instead of accepting the reality of an accident, you have constructed a conspiracy to punish the people you feel failed you. You are lashing out at your landlord, at the maintenance company, even at your own mother and father. She leaned in. You are spiraling. Aren't you? Sarah? It was the same word my mother had used. Spiraling. It was a weaponized word, designed to make a woman's justified anger look like insanity. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I felt the familiar shake in my hands. But then I looked at the binder. I looked at the red tabs. I looked at the timeline I had built. Minute by minute, dollar by dollar. I opened the binder to page 42. I am not spiraling. I said, my voice was low, but it was steady. I am documenting. I pulled out a document. This is the settlement agreement Renhold sent me. I said, offer of $15,000. Clause 4, subsection B. It attempts to blame the tenants for the fire. It attempts to buy my silence. If this was an accident, why does the settlement require a non-disclosure agreement regarding the cause? I pulled out another document. This is the email from the Panama domain used to schedule the fake safety upgrades. The IP address traces back to a server farm used by Gray Ridge's IT department. Timestamp: 3 weeks before the fire. I pulled out a third document. This is the voicemail transcript from the night I was threatened. Stop asking about Bright Hearth. Timestamp: 11:43 p.m., 2 days after the fire. I looked at the lawyer. Resentment didn't write these emails. I said, anxiety didn't forge these maintenance logs. And paranoia didn't drive a Gray Ridge van into the alleyway at 2 a.m. I closed the binder. The snap of the ring sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. I am not motivated by resentment. I said, I am motivated by the fact that you tried to kill me for a tax write-off, and I have the receipts. The lawyer had no response. She shuffled her papers, looking for an angle. But Cal stood up. We have one final piece of evidence. Commissioner, Cal said. He walked to the table. He was holding a single sheet of paper. We subpoenaed the financial records of the Butler Family Trust, specifically regarding their holdings in the Horizon Growth Fund, which is the primary equity backer of Renhold Residential. I heard a gasp from the back of the room. It was my mother. Cal held up the paper. 3 days after the fire, Cal said, his voice hard. On February 6th, the Butler Family Trust authorized a wire transfer of $200,000 into the Horizon Growth Fund. This fund, at the time, was rallying based on the projected insurance payout and land value surge of the Oak Street property. He turned to look at the gallery. He looked straight at Mark and Denise. This investment was made while the embers were still smoking. Cal said, it represents a direct capitalization of the entity responsible for the destruction. Sarah watches her parents' faces. I turned in my chair. My father was white as a sheet. He was staring at the floor. His jaw clenched so hard, I thought his teeth would shatter. But my mother was shaking. Her composure, that armor of pearls and polite distance, was cracking. Mrs. Butler, Cal said, do you deny this transaction? Denise stood up. It wasn't a dignified rise. It was a lurch. We had to think of our retirement, she cried out. The words hung in the air, naked and grotesque. The room stared at her. The commissioner stared at her. Even the Gray Ridge lawyer looked away, embarrassed. We didn't know they were going to burn it, Denise shouted, her voice rising to a shriek. We just saw the market moving. It was a business decision. We have to live too. Sarah, you don't understand the pressure. She was crying now. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of victimization. She was the victim of the market. She was the victim of my ungrateful investigation. I looked at her, and I felt something inside me break. It wasn't my heart. It was the last tether of hope. I realized, with a clarity that was both cold and liberating, that I would never get the love I had been trying to earn. I had been trying to be good enough, successful enough, quiet enough to be worthy of their protection, but they didn't know how to protect people. They only knew how to protect assets. To them, my burning home wasn't a tragedy, it was a market event, and you don't mourn a market event, you leverage it. Sit down, Mrs. Butler, the commissioner said, his voice heavy with disgust. Denise collapsed back onto the bench, sobbing into her hands. My father put an arm around her. But he didn't look at me. He couldn't. The hearing ended an hour later. The commissioner cleared his throat. He looked at the stack of evidence on his desk. Based on the testimony and documentation provided, he said, I am suspending the demolition permit indefinitely. Furthermore, I am referring this entire file to the district attorney's office for a criminal review regarding arson, insurance fraud, and reckless endangerment. He looked at Lena. Investigator Crowell. You are authorized to expand your inquiry. He looked at the lawyers. I suggest you advise your clients that the landscape has changed. It wasn't a conviction. It wasn't handcuffs. The lawyers packed their briefcases with stony faces. They would appeal. They would delay. They would file motions. It would take years. Lena came over to me. It is a start, she said. It is a grind. Sarah, but we got the referral. That is the first step. Imperfect justice. I said, the only kind there is, she replied. I walked out of the building into the late afternoon air. It was cold, the kind of cold that bites your cheeks. A group of the tenants was waiting on the sidewalk. Mrs. Higgins, Mr. Henderson, the man with the terrier. They looked at me differently. Before, I was just the girl in 304 who kept to herself. Now, I was something else. Some of them looked grateful, nodding at me with watery eyes. Some looked fearful, realizing that the fight I had started was going to be long and ugly. All of them looked exhausted. Did we win? Mrs. Higgins asked. We stopped the bulldozers. I said, for now, it won't bring the building back. Mr. Henderson said. He looked at his hands. It won't bring back my tools. No, I said. Winning doesn't rebuild what burned. That is the lie of revenge. It doesn't fix the past. It just clears the debris for the future. I walked toward my car in the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the asphalt. Sarah, I stopped. My parents were standing by their Mercedes. My father was holding his keys. My mother was sitting in the passenger seat, wiping her eyes with a tissue, refusing to look out the window. Mark walked toward me. He looked smaller than I remembered. The suit that usually looked like armor now looked like a costume. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Sarah, he said, look, the hearing. It was intense. Emotions were high. He held out the envelope. I want you to have this, he said. It is a check, $20,000. It will help you get a new place, a nice place. We can put this behind us. We can move forward. It was a transaction. He was trying to settle out of court with his own daughter. I looked at the envelope. I didn't take it. We didn't know about the fire. Sarah, he said, you have to believe that. We trusted our advisors. We made a mistake in timing. I am sorry if it looked bad. If it looked bad, he was still managing the PR. He was still apologizing for the optics, not the betrayal. I looked him in the eye. I felt the cold wind on my face. I felt the war binder heavy in my bag. I didn't take the check. I have one question. Dad, I said. He sighed. What? What did you know? And when did you know it? He blinked. I told you. We didn't know specifics. You knew Gray Ridge was a fixer. I said. You met Silas Vane at the gala. You knew the building was being repositioned. You knew the insurance was hiked. I stepped closer. You knew enough to bet on the fire. I said. You just didn't care that I was inside. Sarah, keep the money. Dad, I said, you are going to need it for the lawyers. I walked past him. I got into my rental car. I turned the key, and my hand didn't shake, not even a little. I pulled out of the lot, leaving him standing there in the fading light, holding an envelope that couldn't buy him an ounce of forgiveness. I drove toward the highway. I didn't know where I was going next. I didn't have a home. I didn't have a family. But I had the truth. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Thank you for listening to Sarah's story. It is a heavy journey, but one that speaks to the strength required to stand up when the world tries to silence you. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below sharing your city or country. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more narratives about justice, resilience, and the long road to truth. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Stay safe and keep fighting.